to be masculine, you had to fight, you had to pick up women, you had to sell drugs, you had to be a badass, like, something that you'd see, in Sons of Anarchy or something that Hollywood wants to put out. That has nothing to do with masculinity. Masculinity is being a man of your word and showing up and doing what you need to do when no one else is looking.
Welcome to Self-Made and Sober. I'm your host, Andrew Lassise with selfmade-coaching.com. And in this podcast, it's my job to interview people who are not only crushing it in business, but have also struggled with addiction in the past and are in long-term recovery. Be sure to join our Facebook group where we help entrepreneurs grow and scale their business at facebook.com/groups/SMC Mastermind, like Self-Made Coaching Mastermind. I hope you enjoy the show, and be sure to subscribe and rate the show afterwards so you can get notified each Friday when we put out a new episode. Welcome to Self-Made and Sober. I'm your host, Andrew Lassise, and with me today is an entrepreneur named JP Alexander. JP is the head of the North American Exterior Company, and he's also recently started a recovery and life coaching company. JP, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so stoked to have you on the show and to hear your story. So you've been sober since January 2nd, 2013. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Awesome. So class of 2013, we both know that we will stay sober for the rest of our lives, one day at a time, because that was apparently the best year ever to get sober.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't believe in coincidences. So I think it's awesome that we're both class of 2013, early 13 too. Sometimes someone's at the tail end of the year and it might be November and December and, but either way.
You're real 2014, but you claim 13. Come on, Get out of here.
Exactly.
So JP, walk us through what it was like being JP as a kid. Do you think that you were born an alcoholic, drug addict? What is your thoughts on how you grew up and what led to your demise?
Sure. My recovery has been a discovery, and the more that I continue to go with inside myself and practice the program and practice these principles on a daily basis, I start to learn more and more about myself. So if you were to ask me that question the first few days I got sober, the first year or the second year, there would have been a different answer. And so I can really only speak on my truth as it relates to me right now in this moment. And what I've got to, for some reason, when you just asked me what it was like in my childhood, which I was not expecting, but it's totally cool. Which is good because I wasn't prepared for it. Something came to me that it had nothing to do with my outside circumstances. It didn't really have anything to do with my parenting, where I went to school, and it had to do with being disconnected from my creator right from the get-go. And that is to say that, I walk hand in hand today with what I call God, which I truly believe is the source of my power. And so as a child, I really was disconnected. And I thought a lot today. This is being my first podcast, and I'm very excited, and I take this stuff very seriously, and so recovery, that is. And that was that. Even as a child, I acted out a little bit here and there. I definitely wasn't the worst one in class. There were the kids that were the real bad kids that went and stuff. So that really wasn't me, although there was definitely some signs here and there. I remember always having morbid thoughts. I would used to fantasize that my parents or my dad, when he'd go to work, he wouldn't come home because he got in a truck accident or something like that. And it's, I would romanticize this and make myself feel depressed and upset all the time. And why would I do that? I'm not really sure, So then as I grew up, and I was always looking for discipline. It says in one of the program recovery, the 12-step that I'm into, right in the literature, it says that me being who I am, being an alcoholic, an addict, being afflicted, and really, really obsessed with narcotics, was that it says we are undisciplined people. And that was me to a core. That one I could relate with. I was very undisciplined, and I didn't even know it that I had been seeking discipline my whole life, which is why I acted out. And as soon as I became a teenager and all through my teens, middle school to high school, that's when I really started acting out, because I was testing my boundaries, and I was really waiting for someone to step up and say, no, this is wrong. This is the way you're supposed to do it, and it carried on into my 20s. And I remember one time in particular, I was probably, I want to say 24. It was right around there. I've had my runs with the law. I probably had some open cases. I probably was on the run. I don't even know. As you know, it just becomes chaotic. These cool stories from when I first started drinking, using with my buddies, like we did that. It all of a sudden became a lifestyle. So I don't even remember a lot of stuff that I did. Because didn't stand out from the day before. But I remember specifically my grandfather looking at me, which I live with my grandparents. I always ran back home to my grandparents. And he just, instead of saying you're messing up or anything like that, he just said, if you keep going on the way you're going, you're going to end up in jail. And I don't know if it was just the way he said it to me, in the calmness, or just that the truth that rang through with the words that he said, that it really hit me. And then before I knew it, I was in jail. I did a couple months. A lot of people say life isn't fair. We don't get what we deserve. I thank God that I didn't get what I deserve. I think that if I'd gotten what I deserved, who knows, I'd be doing years, or I'd be dead by now, or anything like that. So, but either way, I remember that all coming true. Like he could forecast and he could see into my future, because he was of sound mind, so he was living his life, looking at me objectively, no longer stuck inside of my whirlwind, as I like to pull everyone into everything that I'm doing, because it's all about me. I'm selfish and self-centered to the core. And that he took a step out and just looked at me and told me objectively, hey, listen, the path that you're on, he could see it plain as day, like it was written, and it came true. And so, that's the way I was as a child. I mean, I was an athlete. I was fairly good. Every now and then I might have been the best player on the team, but I was always one of the better players. So I never had a problem with that. I enjoyed pretty much every sport I ever picked up. I raced motocross. I really enjoyed that. But I'd always felt less than a little bit, and that I think is why I found myself, and I had arrived. My solution was narcotics, and I just went for it, So it took me over, and I went for the ride, and I was 26 years old in 2013 when I got sober. I'm very grateful. I'm starting to actually really enjoy who I am and my journey, and accept every part of it. Sometimes something crops up. It's like peeling an onion. And, so I've gone through, I'm sure as you may have gone through, there's an inventory process of looking through into myself. And I did the best that I could at the time, but sometimes things just don't pop up till later on. And so, when it asked me at the end, is there anything you left out? And I said, no, that I was telling the truth. And even though a year or two later something popped up, that's because it wasn't available to me at that time. My God, the source, my creator, didn't see it fit for me to remember that at that moment, because I wasn't ready. But when I did remember, that's because he was telling me that I am ready. So every now and then I think I'm doing great, and I am doing great, but I think that smooth sailing from here on out, all of a sudden a memory, and I cringe, oh, that one stings, and it's, if I even told, sometimes it's like I could tell someone it and they'd be like, what's the big deal? Because it doesn't seem like it is, but it's because of the feelings I had when I did it.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that when you're putting out your inventory of the things that you had done in the past. And for those that aren't familiar with it, one of the steps in 12-step recovery is looking at your past and making a discovery of where you were at fault in those things that happened in your life. because a lot of us like to look at it like we've been a victim our whole lives of this person did this to me and this person did that, and we come to find that most of all of our problems we played a role in, and that when we start taking responsibility for it, we can start seeing that we're not only part of the problem, but we can also be part of the solution. But what you're getting at, though, one of my friends had actually told me he had something crazy. It was like 10 or 15 years sober when he remembered that he shot somebody. Like it just completely left his brain for 15 years. But what he came back to, though, with the realization was that even though he hadn't put it on his inventory at the time, he still stayed sober even without it. And it's partly because the feelings and emotions that were associated with those things that happened. So just like how you said, you may say, "Oh, I did this," and they say, "Oh, that's not that bad. Like tons of people do that." But if you're feeling a certain way about it, that's how a lot of these things go. So what do you think was your motivation? How are you feeling when you were using before you got sober? Why would you keep doing it if you knew it was wrong?
It's a good question. I'll spell it out to you as the best as I could. When I was using and I was drinking, I was mostly using heavy narcotics. I was pretty basic. I used cocaine and heroin, and which seems heavy. It is heavy. But once I got into recovery, I found out how basic I was. I mean, I start hearing about these drugs that I never heard about. People tripping on this, doing that, and I'm like, wow, man, I was pretty vanilla actually. I did the upper and then the downer. I went up and then I had landing gear. So um, I don't know, man. I was, as addicts, we like to think that we're uniquely different. We are terminally different. We're not like this. We don't want to do that. And the thing that I like to think and specialize is that we actually all are unique as individuals. Like every, person on this planet is a spiritual being having a human experience, and that we are unique. At the same time, we are all exactly the same. So when I was using and drinking, somewhere inside of me, I knew I was getting to something, because I would openly use a lot of the times. Not to say that I wouldn't hide it sometimes, but I really didn't hide it as much as most people. And I heard this great recording from the speaker that I really look up to. It's funny because he's passed on, and just listening to his recordings, he's become my best friend. And he says this thing, it's kind of funny. He goes, "Yeah, I didn't think I belonged when I came in. I read the title and it said anonymous. And I said, there's nothing anonymous about me. I'm an obvious, everyone around me knows. I know I have a serious problem right now." And I couldn't stop laughing because it was such the truth. There was nothing anonymous about my using. I was an obvious narcotics user, and so I was on a mission. I burned all my bridges, and because I needed to get somewhere that was inside of me, sat right here in the pit of my stomach, and right above my stomach, below my heart, and right in that solar plexus right there. It was a knot, and I needed to get to it. And so I did everything that I needed to do. And when I became sober, it was a 2-year process. The first time I was introduced to a rehab facility, I was 24, and it was a little over. It was about 2 years and 2 months later, going in and out of the program, a couple different rehabs, and that I finally got it. And I just surrendered, and I was ready. I had worn myself out. I think I knew somewhere inside of me that I was going to have to make sure that I did everything I needed to do so there were no more reservations. Because every time that I'd got sober before, life became great really fast, but there was a small reservation somewhere, and I had not quite burnt out every bridge I had, and I had to do. And so I got there. That's what it looked like when I finally was 26 and a half years old in January 2nd, 2013. And I walked into my last rehab. God willing, it is my last one. And it's funny, you started this thing by saying that we're class of 2013 and that we'll never drink again. And I'll say that, that is absolutely my objective and my goal. I do keep it in the moment, so that I can do that. So that's how I accomplish it, is, one day at a time, by being active and doing something, not just saying, oh yeah, today I'm not going to drink. Well, there are action steps. That's what willingness is. Willingness is a verb. You have to make moves. You got to physically move, so, and that's what I do.
So what are some examples of willingness maybe that you had early on in this round of recovery that you weren't willing to do the first couple goes at it?
Yep. Yeah. So, being in the community, everyone that I had associated with up till, when I was in active use, were also using, and a lot of them had been in and out of rehabs as well. And I was going to this one rehab, and there was one counselor that was known to get on you. And I remember right before I went, someone said, oh yeah, I hope you don't get so and so. But part of me said, I hope I do. And when I got there, I went into her office, and she said, you ready to do some work? And I said, yes, I am. She said, good, because I'm going to work you. I said, all right. And that was right there, was the willingness I had. And I did it's funny because we get treated like children, as we should. And from the beginning, we get these packets. We have to even color sometimes, And the thing is, I did everything. I did every piece of packet. My packet was this thick when I left. A lot of people don't even do anything. It doesn't even make a crease in what they give you. And I had did all like the homework and more. And so I think that was the first early sign that I was about this. And there was nothing else that I was about, So it just carried on from there, from when I left there as well.
So you had the willingness to just take whatever they gave you. You didn't chime in on whether or not you thought that was going to help you or whether or not that was what you actually needed to do. You just surrendered and you just said, fine, if you want me to do this packet, boom, I'll do it. You were just done.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up that way too, is that I didn't chime in, because that's something that I would have done, up until that point. It's funny, as an alcoholic and an addict, and everyone I'm surrounded with, for the most part, outside of my businesses also, and we always have something to say, no matter how right the statement was, oh, we'll find something to say about it, and that was me, no matter what. And that's what it looked like. I said, I don't care, dude. I'm not going to say anything, even if it would have to be pretty drastically wrong for me to speak up and say, hey, I don't know. Do you sure? Can you explain this to me? But besides that, yeah, you're right, dude. I just took what they gave me and I did it. And so,
that's great. My friend Jerry actually talks about his example of willingness when he went to treatment. He walked in and they said, what are you willing to do for your sobriety? And everyone, 99% of people, they say, I'm willing to do anything. And they said, okay, well, put your hat backwards. He's like, okay. He puts it backwards. And they're like, put your shirt on backwards. And he's like, okay. And he twists it around on his body and puts sleeves in the other arms. Okay, my shirt's backwards. And they're like, okay, now put your pants on backwards. And then he goes to pull down his pants. They're like, okay, we get it. And he's like, I just didn't understand, like, why like I had to prove myself. And then the next day I came to realize they do that with all the new people. And then this new guy walks in, they say, what are you willing to do for your sobriety? And the guy says, I'm willing to do anything. And they're like, okay, put your hat on backwards. He's like, you're not touching my hat. And that was when he came to the realization that people, they can say the words, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And one of the guys that I look up to, one of the things that he says isn't what are you willing to do, but what are you willing to give up to be sober and to live a different life? Because some of us have things, material things. Some of us have these preconceived notions of how the world works and how people are supposed to treat us. And when you get into recovery, it says your map of the world and how things work is completely wrong. And you need to rewire your brain, rewrite your entire map and outlook. So was that similar to your experience where everything you thought you knew about life was kind of turned upside down and you started seeing things differently? Or
Sure.
was it just it And was that like an immediate change, or did it kind of happen more over time? You had kind of touched on your views of, excuse me, certain situations look differently now than they did at the time, a year later, 2 years later, etc.
I think there was an understanding on my part that everything needed to be changed. Not everything changed right away, but there was an understanding. And so I had to, I was very angry. I was so angry for months, my whole first year, because I knew that I had to do this process. I knew that everything that I was thinking, all my impulsive, gut wrenching reactions to anything that went on throughout the day, I knew was wrong. And so it's a process and a practice to retrain and reprogram my brain, because I had this software that I had developed when I was a child that was of my own making. It was slowly started to develop as a child through my adolescence until I was a teenager. And then my first half of my 20s, I really solidified it in the way that I became because of the belief system, the ideals that I had. And that was, that was a broken belief system based on what I thought I had to do to be cool, what I had to do to stand out and be someone. Because at the root of it all, I want to be known. So how can I be known while I'm an addict and an active addiction? Oh, well, as a man, you should probably be a fighter, so you want to fight. If you can't, you need to be smarter. You need to outsmart people. Maybe you need to hustle and make some money. You need to pick up women. You need to, especially if they're already dating someone else, because that's how you assert yourself over another man. Because I always felt less than. So then for me to self-will myself over someone else, is that I had to do something that in my twisted thinking made me better than that person, which ultimately just held me down there as well, and usually lower than they were. So, and I came to that realization that everything that I had thought was wrong. The problem was that I didn't know what to think now. So it's been a discovery the whole time. And this is where coming in, raising my hand and shutting my mouth, asking for guidance, listening to a mentor, a sponsor, shutting my mouth through a meeting, being of service to others. These are where these great truths come to me, and nothing worth having comes immediately, because if it does, it's fleeting. It's like making money selling drugs. Easy come, easy go. And that's the way it is with everything, whether it's, self-respect and dignity. If I get respect from someone immediately, I'll throw it right out the window. That's just how it works. It's like a universal law. It's not even something that I get to choose. So, and I didn't really understand this either while I was going through this process, and it takes time. So I'm glad that I sat through everything I sat through, and for a year, 2, 3 years. I remember being 3 years sober and being completely miserable. And I had quite a few things on the outside, and I was still hurting pretty bad. But that's why it makes, year 7 now at 6 years sober that much better. I'm just so much more content.
So on the surface level, you probably had some things at year 3, but was it more on the inside? Things weren't how you wanted them to be?
Yes. So up to that point, I was in a race to get back all these things on the outside, which I truly thought were going to help me feel better. There was definitely an understanding that it's not everything's about everything on the outside, and it is an inside job, but not to the extent that I know now. So I was in a rush to start my own business. Had been an obsession with me since I was a child. Elementary school. So I'd started 2. I didn't know how to run 1, so I might as well register 2. Like a good addict. So now I can mess 2 things up at once. So
That's perfect.
So I did. I registered 2. I had I think I had a girlfriend. No, I never had a full stand. What happened was I would get into a relationship and they would last 2 or 3 months, and not by choice. I'd get into one thinking I was going to be, and then 2 or 3 months, it would end. The first time it happened, it was because of this reason. Second time, this other reason. Well, the third and fourth time, if I want to get honest with myself, there's a pattern going on here. And yeah, it might be a different reason, but there's something going on inside of me, which is really why I went back to the steps in a more rigorous way and really started doing some stuff. So yes, I had these as far as like what did year 3 look like? It looked like me working for myself. It looked like me, having a decent vehicle, paying my rent, having a few years of sobriety under my belt, being an upstanding member of society. Oh, I went back to school as well. I was a student at NHTI. I was working full time, so I was doing pretty well. But I'll tell you, I was at a pretty low spot on the inside, and I hit a bottom, which means it's time to go up. And I didn't go there immediately. I sat there for a while, and then when it got bad enough, I decided to do something about it.
Yeah. Alcoholics and addicts are the only people that dig a hole, and instead of trying to get out, they just hang up pictures and say, it's not that bad. So, what are some of the steps you took to get out of that hole?
Yeah, so I reached outside of recovery as well, and then, which is the beauty thing. I mean, in the book of recovery that I look, it says, "Be quick to see where religious people are right," and I took that in even a much more broader sense, and not just like where religious people are right, but be quick to see where anyone else is right. There are many other philosophies out there, and I had done this weekend. I'd always had a problem with men when I was growing up. I had always needed to tell anyone that was older or bigger than me off. I needed to tell them where they were wrong, and I was not disciplined. So this is where I went on a retreat with other men, and I really started to learn masculine principles, real, true masculine principles, not some sugar coated. There's this new term going around. It's called toxic masculinity, which I do not believe in. I don't think it. I think it's actually toxic behavior, and it has nothing to do with masculinity. Because what I thought, the broken belief system that I had growing up, was that to be masculine, you had to fight, you had to pick up women, you had to sell drugs, you had to be a badass, like something that you'd see in Sons of Anarchy or something that Hollywood wants to put out. That has nothing to do with masculinity. Masculinity is being a man of your word, and showing up and doing what you need to do when no one else is looking. Is having integrity. It's not, catering to your emotions at all times, not fleeting from them either, understanding what they are and expressing them when you need to. But, being the rock, understanding not everything's about you, and showing up and taking care of business. So that way because I can't give away anything I don't have. So now I have a son now, I have sponsees, I have coaching clients. And if I'm going to do well for them, it starts with me. So one of the big things I did around year 3 was I got around some masculine men who weren't even in recovery, who are practicing principles on what it takes to actually be a man, and that's not going out and showing off. That's not, so I started switching up, and if I look back, I could start to see my behaviors changing. I stopped buying new shoes all the time. I had a brand new GTI, was an SE, so I mean, it had leather and all this stuff. I traded that in for a work truck. It's a new truck, but it's the low end package, which I'd never bought before. And subtle things like that, because to me, it actually made logical sense that if I'm more willing to make some payments on a newer truck that's a turnkey, so we have no downtime, but at the same time, I got only what I needed. I got the cloth seats now. I couldn't change the volume on my steering wheel. There's as you see, I'm wearing my company shirt. One reason being is it helps to always wear it, but 2, because I don't shop for clothes. Everything I have, all the t-shirts I have, were either given to me or they're work clothes. And it's not because and I don't even have to tell myself today, hey, don't spend money on that. It's because the principles that I practice, that actually just comes out of me now. It's who I am. And I love it.
So that's become part of your life and part of your truth, not just, well, when I'm in recovery, when I'm in a 12-step meeting, this is the JP that I present to the recovery community. Now I'm going to go out in my life and have JP that is the entrepreneur JP. And then when I get home, it's the family JP. They're all one and the same.
Yes. For the first time in my life, you will see me 24/7, no matter where I am. I am the same.
And I know for myself, when I was drinking daily, part of my thought process was, if I'm drunk and do something that people don't like, I can always blame that on drunk Andrew, and you don't know the real Andrew. That was just drunk Andrew that did that. But what ended up happening was drunk Andrew was 24/7. So that was my truth, even though I was telling myself that it was just because I was drinking that this happened. But that became my truth. And the thing that they say a lot in 12-step recovery is you practice these principles: honesty, integrity, trust, brotherly love. You practice that in all of your affairs, not just when you're dealing with alcoholism and addiction, but everything in your life. So 2015, you start up your business. Why don't you walk us through what's going on in your life at that time?
Sure. Yeah. So I started a business, window cleaning. I'd never cleaned a window in my life. I was taking classes at a community college, and I had, my dad's friend down in New Jersey cleaned windows. He said, "Hey, John, why don't you clean windows while you're taking classes?" And I showed up. I worked one half day for him, about 3 hours. We cleaned one house, and that was it. And I left. I honestly thought he was gonna show me more, but I guess he didn't need to. But he did help. He gave me a little bit of a price list. He kind of told me what he charges per window, and that was it. So I had a burning desire, sort of like the day I got sober, that it compelled me past my fears and my barriers of whether is this going to work or not. It didn't matter because the flame was so hot that this is what we're doing. So yeah, I registered an LLC April 1st of 2015. The original name of my company was Alexander's Windows and Gutters, which I didn't even really like at the time. But I was struggling to come up with an idea, and so I thought we'd do window cleaning and gutter cleaning while we're already up there with ladders. After about 2 years, the business really started to pick up. We also introduced a few more services: power washing and roof cleaning, and then working hand in hand with a marketing specialist, the same lady who designed my logo, does all my websiting stuff for me. She helped me. I told her, say, "Hey, I want to rename my company. It needs to be more encompassing. That I don't want there to be." It seemed like there was a ceiling on my name. And for me, anytime I hear, this isn't always true, but for the most part, any business that's named after the owner or anything like that tends to stay a small business, which is fine. A lot of people own small businesses. A lot of people are employees. That seriously is great, and because we're all just supposed to live out our own truths. But that's not the company I wanted. And so I needed to broaden it up, even past my comfort zone, to eventually make it a nationwide company. So I came up with North American. She came up with exterior cleaning because of SEO search words for online. She goes, "This is what you do." And so I said, perfect. So we put it together. And, it took, I had started this company before I did that retreat that I was telling you about, before I started getting around some of these older men. And they started telling me truths to my face, and not in a politically correct way, which is good for me because I'm not very politically correct. When I say that you see the real me at all times, that's not 100% true. That's 99% true. I also understand my audience, and I understand that when I'm speaking to a client or a customer, or if I'm out in public, I can't be swearing at people. But I understand different situations. If I'm having an intense conversation with someone, and it's an intimate conversation where I'm getting down to your truth, or someone's getting down to my truth, with that last barrier and scraping, sometimes there needs to be some really shoving to go on to get that emotional release. So to say, "Hey, that's exactly where we actually need to go. That's what's going to change you." So I finally had these men say, "Listen, yeah, you might have a registered business, but you don't have ownership over anything. Your company is doing nothing. You're still borrowing money from your dad. You're not doing anything." And I needed to hear that, and that set me on fire so that I could prove them wrong. And that sort of tough love that I needed is my mission today, to give that back to anyone that's willing to hear it. And So here we are, 2019, and my business is really a business now. It's a company. We have, you go online, and you got, 150 reviews and stuff that I never dreamed of before. I've got people calling me that I don't even know how they got my number. So it's only the beginning. And I absolutely love where I am today, and it's because I let these men push me.
So taking that fire, what was the first step that you took outside of your comfort zone after they told you how it really was?
I needed to get honest with myself. That was the first thing for sure. And then I really needed to sit down and get quiet. One thing I'd heard Deepak Chopra say was that a quiet mind is better than a positive mind. And anytime someone says something that's kind of um, seems like it's taboo or like really strikes a nerve, I pay attention because I love that stuff. I think a lot of great truths are simple, and a lot of them seem to be hiding in plain sight to a lot of us. And so when he said that, I paid attention. And he said, because a positive mind is where I would go around all day trying to tell myself that I'm in a good mood, that everything's great, just wasting these energies and lying to myself. A quiet mind is the positive one. That's when you're in free flow state. So that's what I had to do. Was I had to sit back, really get quiet with myself, reach out and ask for help. Even though this business might be mine, to say that I'm the only one, it would be one of the biggest lies I would ever say. And I'm not even just talking about my employees or anyone that's worked for me. I mean, I have people around me that have influenced me in ways that, the only way for me to give back is to do it for someone else, and so I think just by opening up, that freelance energy that comes in and out of the cosmos, and actually being accepting is how I started to pick up and really just take it one step at a time. And really that's what it was.
That's great. So what was it looking like when you started? It was only you doing the window cleaning, correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was the point that got you to hire somebody else? Because there's usually some sort of pain point or story behind the first time when you switch the I'm going to keep 100% of the money because I can do 100% of everything, and you're
Mhm.
playing addition subtraction. When you start bringing on employees, you're playing with multiplication. So what's your multiplication story look like?
Yeah, so logically it always made sense to me. I'd heard to hire employees. So that wasn't my barrier. It was more of an emotional barrier, and it was a lot of fear based. I'd heard a quote that said, "I'd rather make 1% off 100 men than 100% off one man," which is myself. That makes perfect sense to me. No problem. You got it. Well, I had a lot of fear. Can I do this? Can I be a leader? Do I have enough work for them? How am I going to provide? I can barely have enough work for me. Now they're going to be depending on me. They're leaving a job they have, so they have all these fears. And what I came down to was that I remember 10 years ago, maybe more, there were 72 million millionaires in America. Now there's like over like 100 million, millionaires in America. And it's not a big deal. You get what you put out there, the value you add. And then I had to sit with myself and say, look at all these other businesses and companies and employees. You don't think that they ever went up against these things? You don't think they ever had challenges? You don't think that 99% of any other entrepreneur that started from the ground up had the exact same thought that you're having right now? What's the difference? Well, they took action. So I just went for it. And then it's kind of like I did a quick mental fear inventory where I write down my fear, I do a turnaround, see what it is. It's a lot of time it's ungrounded about something in the future that hasn't happened yet, probably is never going to happen. And the worst thing that could happen is down the road, someone that I hired say, "Hey, listen, you don't have enough work for me. I'm sorry, but I got to go." End the story. Big deal. That's it. You know what I mean?
It's it's so profound and so obvious, but I remember when I was in that exact same spot, maybe 2015, and there's yeah, 2015 was the first time that I had an employee doing the tech work instead of me. And I hadn't even gone as far to think of, yeah, I guess he'll just quit and get a different job. It was that exact same thought process of, I barely have enough money for myself to be doing all the work. If I start paying him what if it doesn't work out? And it's funny because I hadn't even taken it to that step of, I guess I'll just get a different job and we'll go back, right? But that's the thing though, is if you can't identify and get clarity on your fears, you're never going to be able to get out of your comfort zone until you can make it something bite-sized and manageable. And I think for any entrepreneur who's listening, who's thinking about bringing someone on, who's kind of teetering with that, well, what if it doesn't work, da 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 da, they'll just quit and get a different job, and it happens. But the other side of that is that frees up your time, and your time has value attached to it. And as an employee for somebody else, you're trading your time in exchange for a steady paycheck. But as an entrepreneur, you're exchanging a paycheck for your own time that you can then multiply, leveraging other people's time. And that's what gives you the position to be, was today, Tuesday afternoon, on a podcast. Like, my company is still, companies plural, they're still running. It's happening without me physically being there, but I had to put the people in place, have the processes in place. So did you make any mistakes on your first employee that you changed over time, or were you just perfect off the get?
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't really make mistakes, so
That's what I figured.
yeah. Yeah, my first employee was my brother, and like I said, I don't believe in coincidences. Multiple times a day, I have to remind myself that, um, because I love my brother, and he did exactly what he needed to do at the time. To this day, he is the number one worker, and I mean that on all positive senses. That his craftsmanship, the way that he talks to people, his you know his the way he deals with clients, everything is spot on. He cares more about the company than I did. He cared about more about having a clean window. In fact, I would have to say, Justin, let's go. Like, the window's clean enough. Let's get it. And he goes out of his way to even ask them. Even both my brothers do, but Justin's the one that was working with me at the time, and to ask the homeowner, is there anything else you need from us and stuff. So I actually learned from him. This is a little tidbit I did at the end. It helps with recurring business and reviews. To ask, hey, is there like furniture you need? You got two healthy, strong men right now, or something like that. Most of the time they say no, but builds a relationship. So yeah, in the beginning I had him, and part of me wishes I still had him or someone like him, but I know that God works in the way that it needs to. So yeah, in the beginning I didn't have full-time work, and he sacrificed basically a whole summer working for me without ever getting a 40-hour week. Not one time. I think there was maybe a few times we got close, so also I didn't even know what I was doing. We were like, he worked with me while I was guessing on how to clean windows and like how to price them out. And so, I'm forever grateful for him. And then, and it's not like I learned everything from him. And then the next time I hired in there, I've had multiple men work for me out of sober houses. And then I had, two full-time employees last year that were both my friends, which I know it's tough to have someone work for you that you have a relationship with outside of work. But I also thought that nothing's impossible if I bring God into it. So there was definitely a lot of butting heads. And especially towards the end, we'd all had enough of each other by last November. It's a seasonal business. I'm up here in New Hampshire. So in the winter, I plow, they found different jobs. And we even had blowouts with each other right at the end, but something was still different. And that's because the presence of God was here. And that was the understanding that these behaviors are going to continue on my part unless I walk through them and change them again. And I'm just having a blast. This last 6 months, from like when we ended last November till now, I used to be very petty. And, if you hurt me, my ego, my pride, I want to hurt you back. I want to torture, I want you to burn, and I'm a Leo, so I like to use a lot of fire analogies. Everything about me is burning, so I had the opportunity to change up my thinking and my programming yet again. So, this one employee was a great friend of mine who we blew out with each other he got another job, and part of me just wanted to be like, fuck him, and, like, go get it. That's my old addict way of thinking. That's my old selfish, self-centered way of thinking, which presented me an excellent opportunity to do the complete opposite. And when I do this, that's when I exercise that muscle in me to do what's right and go with what is, God tells me to do, or it just kind of comes inside of me. I know what's right at all times. And at first it's hard. It's a knee jerk reaction. It's, that's painful. I don't want to do that. It doesn't feel right, because what I want is to do something, and I want to feel the effects immediately, just like using. And so, I did what's right. And I tell you, my life is incredible now because of it. Our relationship is great. Tonight we're going to a sporting event together. It's just, I got my brother coming. I got my two guys that worked for me last year, and we're all going to have a great time. And that's because of the presence of God. That's me being willing to check my ego and my pride and understand that we're all humans. Not any of us are perfect, but we always have the opportunity to do right, to correct our wrongs on a daily basis. And with that being said, where I'm at right now is I'm always at the best I've ever been. That's another thing in my recovery. Every year that goes by, I'm always better than I was the year before. That wasn't like that when I was actively using. I didn't learn from my mistakes. In fact, every year was actually worse than the year before, and I always made things worse. Last time this relationship ended, this went this bad. How can I up that so this one ends even worse? And then this time, so even as I'm hiring now, it's so much better. And even being a leader was hard for me. A lot of great leaders I've heard, some guys that I look up to now who are older, who have very successful businesses, I didn't even know that they were like I was until they told me, because of how much they've transformed. In one of this leadership training I went to, the man that was running it, he said that when he was going through it, 30 years ago, they actually had to tie his hands behind his back because he kept trying to do everything. They said, no, you're a leader. You need to delegate. And that was hard for me because I felt bad, which is doing a disservice to everyone, and including myself. And so I had to train myself. It wasn't like, oh, you know what, today I'm going to go out and do quotes, and then I'm going to have my men go out and do the work. Yeah, I did do that. But there were months where I felt guilty. I drove around feeling guilty, and so, but I knew at the same time that I was doing the right thing. I had to continue moving forward. And that was to, leverage my time so that way I can grow the business. So that way I can offer my employees better benefits and, a real career down the road. So for every moment that I feel sorry for myself and I'm feeling guilty, I'm wasting time that I could get there sooner so that we have a business. They're already trading their time and their money for, a fair wage at best. They know that they're in a startup company. I know that they're not getting paid as well as they probably should be, and they know that too. So it's my responsibility to take every day that they're out there working to up the business and step up and get over the way I feel and do what's right. And so because of that, I'm just in a much better spot right now.
So your driving force is being able to provide for other people, not just necessarily lining your pockets, but the benefits that come to the other people as a result of you running a successful business.
100%. Yeah. So my drive to line my pockets, which is with every resource out there possible, is so that I can immediately give it back. Because that's just inside of me. That's not something I made up and I thought one day it sounds cool. That's who I've always been. And now that I'm right with myself and I'm well, I'm not a sick person like I was before, and all my thoughts were twisted and delusional and what I thought was fair and right. It's because I truly trust myself today. So I know, and I don't have guilty when I ask for money, because I know what my services are worth. I know what my time is worth, is because I immediately give it back to whoever deserves it, and I put it back into the economy. I donate it to charity. I do anything. And then why? Because it makes me feel incredible. It makes me feel so light throughout the day.
That's perfect. And so you take the principles from recovery, you apply them to your business, you've become a reservoir, or not, I'm sorry, you've become a river versus a reservoir for the things that are given to you in your business. So the customer gives you money, you don't just hold on to it, but you let it flow through you to be able to impact other people, which is such a great thing. Because a lot of people, it's thanks for the money. This is mine. Like, let me, here's like your scraps. And at the end of the day, people are people. There is something to be said for a business creating profit. And I'm not knocking that at all. But to be able to look at the people who are doing the work and recognizing them as people who are bringing value to your customers on your behalf. And I know going from that solopreneur space where everything is rising and falling on JP. This is JP's company. JP does everything. We got a good review because of JP. We got an upset customer. What's JP going to do to fix it? But then when you bring other people into the mix, and have you ever had an experience with an upset customer that was upset at one of your employees?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So,
And did
I
you
can,
internalize that as like, how dare you destroy my name? Or how are you feeling when that happens?
yeah, this is where fear gets me real good. And this is where I get to find out real quick, where my shortcomings are. They say, in recovery, they say you want to find out where your shortcomings are, get into a relationship. Well, having a business is very similar. They goes hand in hand. This is my relationship. The business itself is in its own entity. And I have to practice every day to remove myself from that, because just like you said, I get a bad review or someone calls, hey, I don't think this worked out that well. I immediately go into fear. And oh my God, they're attacking me. They're taking me down as a person, because what it is I'm not anchored in faith. I'm anchored in other people's opinions, and that my business. So yeah, I've had some blowouts, not very many. I'm pretty good because I understand where it's coming from, but I definitely did not handle every situation best. And a lot of times I was just full of fear, riddled. And I'm like, man, I just hope this goes away. I don't know
Mm.
what to do about it, which is such a horrible feeling for me. I hate being hopeless. I hate hoping that things will just work out. I want to take action. I want to be the one. So, and that was a process too. So, yeah, yeah.
So in taking action moving forward, tell us about your recovery and life coaching company that you're starting up.
Sure. Yeah. So it became clear to me around October of 2018 with a friend. I think you know him, Nick Wright. We're great friends, and sometimes we hang out. We have what I think is some of the more profound conversations we have. Very enlightening. Our vibration levels get so high that I feel lighter and more energized than any drug I've ever had. It's just on the next level. And he'd been doing some public speaking. He's doing his own thing. And I've always been a pretty good speaker. I wouldn't say I'm the best. I always have room to improve everywhere. It seems to come pretty natural to me. I can deliver a message that's powerful and impactful. It's not coming from a place of ego. If it was, I wouldn't say it. And that's just my truth. And so by saying that and admitting it to myself and to you right now in this podcast, well, now I have a responsibility. If this God granted me this opportunity to be a speaker and convey my message, then I can't be sitting on this. I need to do something about it. So from that point on, he said, dude, you need to be a speaker. And I said, yeah, I think you're right. I have no idea about what though. He said, being a leader. And even then I'm like, yeah. Yeah, I don't, sure. A lot of times, even if I don't agree with it, it doesn't mean I disagree either. I just am open to the fact that I don't fully understand yet. So right there came the time, the transition shift, and it hit me, and it came over top of me that this is the area I'm going to. It was very broad at that point. I didn't know the specifics. So over that, I started looking into coaching. I got a coach right from the get-go. I had a very high a coach that made a lot of money that I didn't realize it was in, and it's not about the money. It's about that if you earn that much, it's because you're bringing that much value. So that's the way I saw it. And right from the get-go, she would say, yeah, she said this to me, and we had 3 calls, and I remember always her being like my cheerleader too, which is like a red flag to me. I'm like, she's just trying to butter me up. You know what I mean? Like, what's going on here? And, and one time in particular, she said, "Are you ready to make a lot of money real fast?" And I said, "Hey, listen, that sounds great, but that's not why I'm doing this." And she said, "No, that's not what I'm trying to say." She goes, "What you have to offer is very valuable. It's not something you can teach." And I said, "Okay," and I sat with that for a while. And so what I did was I started reading books. I started watching podcasts. I tried to see how can you coach someone, because I'd actually already been coaching my whole life. It's just my personality. And so I needed to fine tune it. And, I've got some other coaches around me, entrepreneur coaches. We've got Jesse Harless. I don't know if you've heard of Mark Crandall yet. He's on
He's going to be on the show in like 2 weeks.
yeah, serious velocity going on with the universe and coaching and everything he does, group facilitating. He's got his own podcast. And, so being surrounded by these men and talking with them, I'm waiting for someone to say, yeah, you're pretty good, but maybe you should do this or maybe you should do that. And I never got any feedback that way. Everything was positive. In fact, Jesse was always been lit up whenever I told him, because he does the same thing as a recovery and life coach. So I was waiting for that kind of like, oh, you're doing it too, like I would get from my old past, because that's the way I used to act. And he's like, that's great. I think you do a great job. Yeah, thanks. Kind of appreciative, but man, really? And then Mark is like, yeah, so when are you basically, like, when are you going to stop being a bitch and like do it? Like, you have everything. Like, stop doing this. So I did it, and I stepped up, and right now I have not gotten paid $1 for coaching, but what I have done is set the context of when I'm with a client that, hey, listen, this is what we're doing. I'm not here to be your friend in that. So I've built some of the groundwork, which I've wanted to do. And then today, it just hit me right before this. I went and I registered my first LLC for a coaching business. So
That's incredible. And I know for myself, getting that first paying client, and a lot of the people that I do coaching with, like I coach coaches, and getting that first paying client, even if the person you're working with is a beta client, tell them, look, I'll be willing to do this if you can introduce me to 3 different people who could benefit from the service. So don't, and this is really for anyone who's listening. I'm personally not a fan of the giveaway for free mentality, not right or wrong, but it's not for me. But make sure that if you're providing value to somebody, that there's still some sort of exchange of energy, because that way they're showing you have value in what you're bringing to their life. And especially with recovery coaching and life coaching, things in that world where people have breakthroughs, you're rewiring their brain. Like if they went to the doctor, or if they went to a surgeon and they did open brain surgery, rewired the way that you rewire, they wouldn't be like, that should be for free. They'd be like, yeah, a surgeon went in there and rewired how I think and look at the world. This is incredible. They're a great surgeon. You're just doing that and it's not as invasive, but you're still rewiring the brain to see things in a different light and to open people to new opportunities that they themselves can't see, because we're the star in our own movie and everything else can be going on, and we're just an extra in the background, and we trip on the sidewalk, and in our mind it's the spotlight's on us, but like, there's a huge action scene going on and nobody's paying attention to the person that tripped on the sidewalk. There's so much else going on, but we just live in this world where we're just so focused on the way we see things, and having someone with an outside perspective who has our best interest in mind. It's very, very similar to sponsorship in recovery. The only difference being sponsorship in recovery is strictly based on altruism. There shouldn't be an exchange with money as far as the 12 steps go, and that's a whole different conversation. But when you're changing someone's life, and you're changing how they see things and you're opening them up to new opportunities, so many people, they have this fear around asking for payment. And what I've come to find is just my first client, I didn't say you are my first client. I just treated as if, and I said, this is what I charge. And if you don't get value, I'll give you your money back. And that was sort of my way of easing into it to see if I was worth the price that I said, but it still scratched that itch of, well, who am I to charge this person? Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm.
So it was a nice medium of, this is what it costs, but I offer 100% guarantee. I'll give you your money back if you don't get the value. And that way, it's more difficult for the client also to be like, thanks for the value, but I want all my money back. It's difficult for them. They also now have skin in the game. So when people have skin in the game, they're going to, you can sit down, chart out this whole path for them to take, and then they don't take it.
Right.
But when there's an exchange of money involved and an exchange of energy, they are giving to you and you are returning the value to them. So if there's only one exchange, and one of my previous guests just said this, he said it's basically like saying I love you to somebody and they don't say I love you back, but they're still excited that they got the I love you. They still feel that way, but they didn't say it back and they're just hoarding it. And both sides now feel awkward because there wasn't that give and take. You can dress it up like, well, I'm doing it because I want to help, which you can do, but you can also receive compensation for helping people. And there's nothing wrong with that. So JP, in wrapping up, what piece of advice would you give an aspiring entrepreneur who's maybe on the edge of starting something and just kind of needs that push? What would you recommend to them?
Sure. Yeah. So you will be like the 5 closest people around you. If you want to do anything, I say this sometimes when I speak, is that no matter what you want to do, so that can be an entrepreneur starting your own business. If you want to get sober, if you want to be happy, if you want to be happy in sobriety, if you want a lot of money, if you want houses, get around people that have those things and do those things. It's the most simple thing to do, yet it seems to be one of the toughest things to do. And that's because it's uncomfortable. If I'm surrounded by people that I'm comfortable with every day, yeah, that's great, but I'm not growing. So for me to get around some of these people that are in some of these masterminds that are either multimillionaires, they have multiple businesses, they're leaders, they're high frequencies, these people that run on 4 or 5 hours of sleep every night because of the disciplines that they have. Dude, in the beginning, I didn't have good conversation with them. I didn't know how to communicate with them. There was very little BS and it felt awkward, but I knew that's what I had to do. And so that's where I think the barrier comes in, is when, for me personally, if I'm going to jump into a new group of people, or if I have a client like cleaning windows, what we do, we end up in a lot of like multi-million-dollar homes. So then I try and I build a relationship with the customer, and I try to really build a relationship. And for me to say, hey, would you mind having a cup of coffee sometime? That's a big deal. And then they actually follow up through with it. So, there's endless opportunities out there. The universe is abundant. So continue to move forward. Don't be afraid to fail, and just be around who you want to be.
That's so good. So JP, in wrapping up, where can people find you online to learn more about you and your companies?
Sure. Yeah. So you can find me. You can find me on Facebook. JP Alexander. I haven't started a Facebook. Like I said, I just registered my company with an LLC. I don't even have an email for it yet. But my other company, Exterior Cleaning. So it's North American Exterior Cleaning. You can find us at NorthAmericanEC.com. You can email me at any time at john@NorthAmericanEC.com.
Perfect. Well, JP, thank you so much for being on the show. For everyone listening, check out JP. He's doing great things in the world. I'm sure your coaching company is going to blow up, and this will be one of those things like, hey man, here's the video of JP Alexander on a podcast before his coaching company became what it is today. This is like the start of Tony Robbins in the living room. All right, JP, thanks for being on Self-Made and Sober, man. I really appreciate you, and thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you so much for listening to Self-Made and Sober. Be sure to join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/SMC Mastermind, like Self-Made Coaching Mastermind. I hope you enjoyed the show, and be sure to subscribe and rate the show so you can get notified each Friday when we put out a new episode.